When he walked up, he knew. He prepared the place, and, Anyway, so this is where the number 10 goes to as far as the group of meeting of the Jewish people. And there's one other thing that I wanted to tell you, and I wanted to wait. Oh, when I read the Quran, before I went to Malaysia, I read the Quran because I wanted to know what they believed before I lived there. And there's a very similar account in the Quran. And I may get this wrong because it's been since 1990, which was, 20-some years ago that I read the Quran. But Muhammad met the Lord, and the Lord says, I want you to instruct your people to pray 80 times a day. Right? And he says, well, that's too many times. And he whittled the Lord down to 5 times a day. And that's why they pray 5 times a day. And they have a name for each prayer, Maghrib and Waqtu, Izhar. And they got 5 different names. Anyway, and each time of the day is a different prayer. One is before sunrise, one is after or at sunrise. And then they have throughout the day 5 prayers. And that's why you see at different times of the day these people up in the minarets calling out. The difference is, when I read that, I said, that just doesn't sound right. The difference is that the Lord mandated something, and then, or I won't say the Lord, that Allah mandated something, and Muhammad whittled him down from there. Whereas nothing is mandated here. In other words, it just says he asked the question, what if there's 50 people? What if there's 45 people? What if the Lord didn't say, I'm going to go destroy this place unless there's 50 people, right? And so it just didn't seem like, to me, why would man be bartering with God? And, and I that just clued it.
It would be like Moses when he got the 10 Commandments
right.
to God.
Well, can we just drop off 10 of these, right? And there is, in some instances, kind of that with Moses and God, where Moses, falls on his face and asks the Lord to relent and this kind of stuff. But as I said, that's done for our benefit. And for us to understand God, not to contradict what God has ordained. So and I kind of clued into that when I was reading the Quran. And then another thing is that you can see Elijah going up to the heaven in a whirlwind on a chariot of fire, and I have no problem believing that. But at the same time, I have a problem, and I had a problem. This is before I had ever really read the Bible. I had a problem with believing that Muhammad could ride a horse up to heaven. He rode a horse up there, right? And it doesn't sound right. And here he is in heaven, and he's face to face with God, and the whole thing doesn't sound right. Now that I know the nature of God, he couldn't be face to face with God because, God is infinitely holy, and this is just a guy from the sons of Adam. And I know the doctrine of the Bible now. It would be impossible. But at the time, it still didn't seem right. The Quran, when I read it, just did not fit the bill for something I would say, wow, this is really holy. Whereas when I read the Bible, I said, there's something about this book that begs me to do further study. And, obviously that's why we're all in here, is because we all want to further study it. But there's just a huge difference between what you're being presented with in the Quran. And I'm not going to go back and reread it. And I don't, I just couldn't care. But it just sounded wrong from the beginning. Anyway, but there is that in the Quran where there's this kind of bartering with God. Well, in this case, he is just simply asking, what about this? What about this? What about this? And the Lord made a promise. If there's 10. Now, I heard a great sermon, and I will digress here just because we've gone through this chapter so quickly. Adrian Rogers did a wonderful sermon on this. And I have to share you his logic. Is here is Abraham. Who is in Sodom while Abraham is standing talking to these two people? Lot, his nephew Lot. And he knows Lot. He's dealt with them. They lived together. They separated. He accepted the nice place to live, and he probably knew the state of Sodom and Gomorrah, and he also knew his son Lot. And he said, I think, this is Adrian Rogers now, I think that he knew Lot's character. And he's thinking, Lot should have gone down there and told him about the Lord. And he says, maybe he told him about 50 people. And then he says, he got thinking after saying that, well, Lot was a little bit backslidden. He said, maybe he didn't get around to telling all the people in his neighborhood. He says, how about 45 people? And then he says, Lot was really an impetuous young guy. And he's going through all this thinking about Lot and how backslidden this guy is. And he says, he had to have told him about 30 people. He must have told him about 30 people. He said, well, maybe not. He had a lot of sheep and he had a lot of stuff to do. And he's kind of rationalizing why he finally said he had to have told him about 10 people.
Because they were his family.
Yeah, he's got his family. He's got the brothers and sisters or whatever. He says, He must have told them about 10 people.
Yeah.
The what?
He's got his daughters that he often...
Yeah, I mean, for crying out loud, there must be 10 people that he's told about the Lord that are righteous. And, well, we find out the next day that that's not the case, or the next... But anyway, I thought it was a wonderful way of looking at that. I don't know if that was his idea or if he got that from another sermon he had heard in the past, but I can tell you that someday I will give a sermon on it, and I will have robbed Adrian Rogers of part of his... It's so well done. It was so well done that I will never be able to read these particular passages and preach on them without thinking what he said. So I will have to amend it a little bit and throw it into a sermon because it was so well done. It was just, man, just to think, here we're thinking about our children, and yet we raised them right. Well, did we? Was it our fault? And then, well, they went to college, and we didn't send them to a Christian college, and, maybe they never got, and we can do the same thing in our own life. And that's why we need to make sure that we establish good Bible doctrine in our family now. Yep, there you go. So, okay, chapter 19, anybody?
Now the two angels came to Sodom in the evening, as Lot was sitting in the gate of Sodom. And when Lot saw them, he rose to meet them and bowed down with his face to the ground.
Okay, so he's whether he knew these people were angels or whether he thought they were men, he's obviously already showing the signs of a good, host. And I've heard this, I can't say this is true, but I've heard it so many times that it simply must be true, or it's just one of those things that gets passed on in sermons that has just infiltrated society. But when you accept somebody into your home in Mideastern society, it is the highest duty of the Mideasterners to protect you and to treat them even better than your own family. Now, I've heard that so many times. Maybe I've even seen it on a movie like Omar Sharif or something, where once you're welcomed into the home, you are their highest obligation. So we can kind of see that already. He's saying, here's some visitors, I'm going to welcome them in my home, and he bows down to them in reverence and respect. Doesn't mean he's worshiping them, but he's simply paying obeisance to some people that are coming into the town. So if that's the case, then we can understand why what is coming happens, is as far as the protection of the people. Has anybody ever heard the reason why I'm going to bring this up is because what I just said. We learn things, and whether it's true or not, they're passed on, and that's why I don't know if that's true. But has anybody ever heard that if sheep, when it says that he lays me down beside still waters in the 23rd Psalm, the metaphor is used because if sheep go to water that's real rough and drink out of it, they'll drown. Have you ever heard that? Okay, good, because I've heard that in a couple sermons, and it's not true at all. They go in, and they're not stupid enough to drown in lapping water that's real rough. So just so you know, if you ever hear that in a sermon, it's not true. Okay, anyway, but that's what I'm getting at. People use things that aren't always true, or they're making a point, and next thing you know, it becomes doctrine within Christianity when it had nothing to do with the truth at all. So there you go. Lil, before we go on, if you want any of these shirts, I got some shirts here. You're more than welcome to take them. They're from me traveling last year, and my friend had a box left over, so you're more than welcome to grab them. Anyway, because I know you may leave early. So if you stay, that's fine. If you leave early, just go grab a shirt if you want it. Doesn't matter. Anyway, where were we? Okay, verse 2.
And he said, Now behold, my lords, please turn aside into your servant's house, and spend the night and wash your feet. Then you may rise early and go on your way. Okay,
now I mentioned washing your feet in Sunday class a couple weeks ago. I'll try to put that together this week. If I don't, I'll do it later. But because this Sunday is, or is it next Sunday? Next Sunday is when I have to teach the Sunday school to everybody. Anyway, washing your feet, if you look at the terminology for wash your feet, it is a custom because they're walking on dusty ground, and if you've ever been there, you know it's like walking in Texas. It's dusty, it's dirty, it's just, and so, but these are the angels of the Lord, and they're already holy, right? They're angels that are doing the Lord's work. They're already holy, they're already righteous, but they are walking on a sin-stained world. And that plays into what we will see later in the New Testament in a couple of applications, and it will open up things to you. So I'll try to remember to do this in a Sunday school. I'm not going to do it now. But anyway, the term washing your feet throughout the Bible has different meanings, or it can have different connotations. I believe when David tells Uriah to go in and wash his feet, it means He's asking him to wash feet, which means enter your home and stay there, but his intent was to get him to sleep with his wife Bathsheba. But anyway, you'll see this term wash your feet, and it does have some pretty neat spiritual connotations. So just kind of pay attention to it when you see it here, and eventually we'll talk about it, but I'm not going to do it today. Okay, go ahead.
They said, however, no, but we shall spend the night in the square. Yet he urged them strongly, so they turned aside to him and entered his house. And he prepared a feast for them, and baked unleavened bread, and they ate.
Have you noticed that every time somebody prepares bread in the Bible, it's always unleavened bread? I mean, anytime somebody visits, it's unleavened bread. And I don't know why it specifically says that. We know that what the unleavened bread symbolizes, but why even sometimes when it's not angels, they would prepare unleavened bread, and it specifically says that when it's not the time of the Passover, when it was mandated. In this case, though, because they're angels, possibly he knows that, and he's preparing unleavened bread because of the connotation to sinlessness. I don't know. But anyway, you'll see that again and again and again, where people prepare unleavened bread, and sometimes it's not in a context where I think it would be necessary to include that, and yet it's included. Just so you know. What's that? Well, you can eat it sooner, but, you know, to me, I'd rather wait and have I love bread. I mean, my wife knows if she gives me bread for dinner, I'm going to eat that and I'm not going to eat anything else. Man, if it's good bread, it is my favorite thing to eat is yummy bread. Oh, so she's got to be really careful how much bread she brings out, because that's all just sit and eat. And then all the work that she did, just, it gets totally thrown away. Anyway, so go ahead and keep going.
Before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, surrounded the house, both young and old, all the people from every quarter. And they called to Lot and said, where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us that we may have relations with them.
Okay. Now that, where are we? Before we lay down, the men of the city of Sodom, both young and old, and all the people from every quarter surrounded the house. So obviously it's a mob, unruly mob. And they called out to Lot and said to him, where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out. My Bible says that we may know them. Okay. Now, right. Well, the term to know them, I would imagine, yeah, some of them, actually it says to know them carnally, but carnally is inserted. In other words, in the original, it would say to know them. And I am wondering if to know them is the same word as like Adam knew his wife, right? So anyway, and I'm sure that would be the case. I could pull out the Strong's Concordance if any of you wants to know, and we could find that out real quickly. But that's what I suppose is going on there. So go ahead, verse 6.
But Lot went out to them at the doorway and shut the door behind him and said, please, my brothers, do not act wickedly. Now behold, I have 2 daughters who have not had relations with man. Please let me bring them out to you and do to them whatever you like. Only do nothing to these men, inasmuch as they have come under the shelter of my roof.
Okay, now this is where they always insert what I said a little earlier, that it was the highest duty of a person to protect the people in his house once a guest had come in. That is where I've heard that in this context. Now, if that's true, then you would understand why he did this. If it's not true, then somebody in modern times is trying to justify why they've done this by making up a thing about the Mideast. So I don't know if that is a true culture and custom or not. I've heard it so many times, though, that I do believe it's correct, that this man has brought these people into his home. They're under the protection of his home, and he even uses the term, these people are in my home or whatever. Don't do anything to them, and instead take these daughters of mine who are virgins. And, you know, at the same time, we have to understand, regardless of whether that is true about the people being protected in his house, that ladies were not looked at. I don't care what anybody says. Ladies were not looked at with the same respect as the men. And, you know, this is not, because we're in America, we look at people with exactly the same dignity and respect. But you go to almost anywhere else in the world, and that is not the case. I lived in Asia, and it was not the case. I can tell you that. people in Asia, the countries that I lived in, would understand this completely. They'd be like, yeah, he did the right thing. I mean, they'd have no problem with this. We do because we are a Western society raised on Western values. Now, there are some people in this country that obviously are, you know, what's the term, bigots or pigs or whatever. Whatever the term is where you diminish women. Chauvinists, male chauvinists, that's right. The Billie Jean King versus Connors, was that his name? But yeah, and she gave him a pig before they started as a gift. Anyway, so